Hey, welcome to Playing for Keeps, the show where we take a deep dive into emotional intelligence, sex, love, adult attachment theory, mental health, therapy, and everything in between that creates great relationships. Your host, DJ, is a certified life coach and emotional intelligence practitioner. She's here to be of service to all the listeners interested in love and relationship. Now, here's your host, DJ.
Hello, everybody. This is your girl, DJ, with Plan for Keeps podcast. And today I have a special guest, Jiva Sam and his wife, Solange, mentor married couples from breakdown to breakthrough in 10 weeks or less, guaranteed. They also prepare couples for the realities of marriage. They bring their 36 plus years of marriage and Jiva's 35 plus years of pastoral experience to their marriage mentorship. They are parents of 3 adult children. And today, Jiva is here to speak on dealing with past hurts, internal purities, resolving conflicts, communicating without being misunderstood. How are you today, Jiva?
I'm doing great, DJ. Good to be with you today.
It's good to be with you too. So let's kind of just dive into it a little bit. Why don't you tell the audience about yourself and about the programs that you and your wife do?
Okay. So as I said, my wife and I have been married for over 36 years. It'll be actually 37 years in a couple of months.
Wow.
And ours was an arranged marriage. In other words, our parents basically brought us together. So we never met each other before, known each other before, or even known of each other before. And so this was back in the days when we couldn't check somebody's profile on Facebook or Instagram or something. But we trusted our parents' decision. And so that's how we got started. And okay. and along the way, my training, my career, my profession was as a pastor in a Christian church. And so along the way, we saw not only our own marriage, but a lot of other marriages. And people would, come to me because I was the pastor, asking for help with their marriage. And so, we did the best that we could. And then as time went on, because we've been in ministry for over 30 years, we noticed that the divorce rate kept on going up. And then some people in our close circles actually started getting into marriage difficulties. And these were like good people individually. They were in our circle, they were good church people, Christian people, leaders, and yet they couldn't get it together in their marriage.
Wow.
And so we started asking, and they started asking us rather to help them. And so we started asking, what is going on here? Why is it that these people are not able to, get along in their marriage? And so we got this revelation, and this is the key revelation on which our entire marriage mentorship is structured. And the revelation is that there really are not anything that you can call marriage problems, but you have individuals with their own problems coupled together in a marriage,
sure.
Right? And so until you help each person deal with their problems, and a lot of times the problems are past hurts, previous relationships. Sometimes not everybody is blessed with a great childhood.
Yeah.
Not only is everyone is blessed with the opportunity to be with two parents, and two parents that get along.
Yeah.
And so you're exposed to all sorts of situations. And the thing is, when you come into a marriage, you bring all of that with you. And so what we found was that when we help them to dig deep down, and they don't do it on their own, we do it, with the help of God, the Holy Spirit. Then we find that we can go really deep, and then find out who all needs to be forgiven, how the hurts can be healed, and at that point things begin to change. Their hearts get softened towards each other. And then we found the second thing is that over the years, and my wife and I were typical examples of this, you get into some very poor patterns, whether it's conflict resolution, communication, spending time together, time apart, all those kind of things. And in the beginning, because you love each other and you're still caught up in a romantic haze, You'll tolerate that.
True.
But there comes a time when it's like those things that used to look so cute are horrible. They irritate me now. Well, stop doing that. Well, I thought you liked me doing that. Well, I did when we were dating, but not anymore. Okay, grow up, man. And so you get into those kind of conversations, and so we find that we have to help people replace some of those patterns with healthy patterns, and basically that's what we do when we do those two together, one right after the other in that order. We find that people start getting their breakthrough.
Gotcha. Okay. So how do you work with someone who's set in their ways, like as far as like conflict resolution and like how does your program help individuals like that?
Okay. Well, first of all, we pre-qualify the people that come into our program.
Okay.
And so one of our basic requirements is that both husband and wife are totally committed to getting their marriage back on track.
Okay.
If only one is, then we don't take them on.
Okay.
That's our niche. That's what we found. Because the thing is, this doesn't mean that you cannot just work with one person. But this way, it's not like you're working with one person, then they got to go and convey everything to the other person. Like you don't get caught up in that, right?
Gotcha.
Yeah. And so people who come to us are highly motivated, to get things on track. It's a little bit like the difference between going to high school in your teens and then going for adult education classes when you're in your 30s.
Gotcha. Okay. So when couples come in to speak to you and get mentorship, is it mostly just conflict resolution in past traumas? What are there any other issues that may occur?
Well, people come with what I would call presenting symptoms. It's very much like going to a doctor. You go to a doctor and you say, "Doctor, my arm hurts," or "I get this rumbling in my stomach." Whatever the thing, you present the symptoms, and then the doctor has to diagnose. And so people come to us with presenting symptoms, and one of the symptoms is we cannot get along. We're arguing with each other all the time. Like we can't see the good in each other. But also another very common symptom that people come to us is with they're not intimate with each other at a physical level. So like we even had one couple put it in a very like I'm not going to say graphic, but in a very like a colorful way.
Okay.
She said that we could not even hold hands. Like that's how bad things had gotten. And she said we were like two porcupines sitting together.
That's pretty. They were pretty hot in the beginning.
Yeah, and so now they can't get along, because they both are always, prickling each other, hurting each other, and so so usually, like people are not communicating, or when they're communicating, it is not pretty, and the conflicts don't lead to resolution. They fight, and then they, get away from each other, or they hold grudges, those kind of things. But the sexual dysfunction is something very, very common. As a matter of fact, there are many surveys that say that very high percentage of North Americans live in what they call sexless marriages. Yeah. And so those are kind of things that people come with. Yeah.
And it's not advertised to in our culture really to speak on sex like that. Kind of not really doing the act, but just to kind of even speak on it, just so they can kind of come to some grounds. And then I think during the relationship, sex lacks because I guess responsibilities and stuff like that too. But I know that's a big problem, and they don't put that out there. I think they say that most marriages fail for financial reasons, but they also say a lot of marriages fail for intimacy and things of that nature too.
Yeah.
I think that was something I read up on.
Yeah.
So how do you peel back the layers as far as, so somebody may come in, like the example you gave, your arm hurts, or they may come in and say, okay, we can't get along. How do you help them peel the layers to what the real cause is for why they can't get along?
All right. So the best way that I can help our listeners understand that is by, first of all, realizing a fundamental fact of life, and that is the way that we are created as human beings. We are actually spirit beings with a soul in a body.
Right.
Okay. And so what we specialize in doing is actually starting with the spirit level, which is the deepest part of our being. And so my wife and I do that on our own. We also have a very specialized team that actually works with people that come into our program. Like they do like a deep dive.
Okay.
And then it's kind of a prayerful atmosphere where they ask God to show them, like where is some of this hurt coming from? And so you go back, and so sometimes the conflict on the outside looks like it's between you and your spouse, but really the origins of that may go back to something that happened between you and your sibling,
Right.
when you were a child, and you were still holding on to that hurt. And so every time your spouse tries to take something of yours away, like you don't consciously think of this,
Yeah, you
but
don't
you
understand.
respond out of that deep hurt in the spirit.
Wow. So you
Yeah,
guys really do get deep into the real root cause to the issue instead of the surface level. That is great.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah. And sometimes in terms of the sexual issue, unfortunately, in our North American society, at least from what we know, a lot of people experience some form of sexual abuse in their lifetime. Women more than men, and like we're just very vulnerable as children, and
Yeah.
often at the hands of family members. And so sometimes, so you got those memories, and sometimes people try to talk about them when they're children, and they're told to stay hush.
True.
And so when they do, you keep it to yourself, you're bottled up all inside. And now all of a sudden your spouse touches you a certain way, it triggers that memory
It
from your
triggers.
childhood.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
that
yeah,
is true. That
yeah,
is kind of why sometimes people have low libido too. Yeah, that is true too.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah,
Wow.
yeah. So we
Okay.
found that when we start at that level, at the spirit level, then we move to the level of emotions and feelings.
Okay.
Yeah. And so at that point, we teach people how to express the way they're feeling, with each other in a safe environment. Like a lot of people don't know how to fight, while maintaining each other's honor and respect. And
True.
so when you respond out of all that deep-rooted hurt, then you're going to respond in a way that inflicts even more hurt on the other. We have a saying, and the saying is that hurt people hurt people.
For people.
Yeah,
True.
right. And so this way, once you remove that deep down inside, the spirit hurt, now because you've forgiven them, you can now express your feelings. And since both have experienced the deep inner healing, now both of them are more willing to listen to the other person when they say, hey, when you said that, it made me feel. And it's
Got
like,
you.
you don't come back and say, well, you have no right to feel that way, because you're not mad at them at a deeper level anymore.
Right. Got you. Okay. So those are the two ways. Did you mention a third way that you deal with it? You said spirit, emotional, and then
Yeah. So the second is what we call the soul. And the soul is a kind of a collective name that we
okay.
give for our mind, our will, and our emotions. All right. So all of those are involved in there. And so when I talk about the mind, sometimes you got to reprogram someone's thinking. So for example, if your parents or your teachers or somebody told you when you were younger, you'll never amount to anything.
Yeah.
Then that's a tape that you play over and over again. So now, you have to replace that. And so that's definitely in your thoughts. So that's
Sure.
your mind, or somebody might have told someone, what, you're not pretty. And so, or sometimes when somebody has a breakup, they can actually say to themselves, I guess I'm not beautiful enough.
Or not worthy enough.
Not worthy enough.
Right.
So all those things are thoughts in our mind. So we need to replace those thoughts, with who God says we are,
Right.
that we are worthy, that we are loved, that we're accepted for who we are, not for what we do,
Right.
And so, so that's why the soul area quite often takes some time, to work on. And so now when you get your spirit and soul together, the body always follows suit.
Sure.
So one of the reasons, for example, like husbands and wives don't have enough sexual intimacy is because they've bottled up feelings, or they're holding some, wrong that was done against them. But when you take care of all of that, now all of a sudden you're freed up.
Sure.
You don't have to hold yourself back from your partner. You can give yourself to them totally. And so the intimacy which began in the spirit and then at the soul now also shows up in the body.
Got you. So let me ask you this question. So a lot of people, especially in the North American culture, so when people come to the conclusions that you came to, possibly through counseling, but even through own experiences, you yourself and your wife, you guys were arranged together. So how were you able to kind of grow within your relationship? Was it just through the Lord? Was it through, your own personal experiences? How did you guys kind of grow together to this knowledge to be able to help other people?
Okay. So obviously, we both, came from like a faith foundation, like my wife also was raised as a Christian, and so we definitely had, the Lord as the center of our marriage. But there's something about the Indian culture, which is also a biblical, attitude towards marriage, and that is till death us do part.
Okay.
That like once you made a commitment to the other person, then it was for life. And so like for example, like my wife always likes to say, like divorce was not in our vocabulary or our dictionary. And so the Indian mentality, at least in those days when I was growing up, was basically, hey, here's this person, so you're going to learn to love this person. Like you're not going to get, discouraged just because you're going to, see some things that you don't like. You're going to find out, how can I overcome? How can I make this marriage last? And in those days, there was quite a strong stigma against divorce, in the Indian society. And that's what we saw our parents do. We had great role models all around us where we know people had problems, but they just stuck it out. And maybe not all of them were healthy marriages. We're very honest about it. But for the most part, our attitude was, we're going to find a way, to make it work. And so with that determination, which again is a mind thing, it's a soul thing, and the spiritual foundation. Now, that doesn't mean that we had a perfect marriage. We still had our share of difficulties,
right.
But we started out with that fundamental premise that we will be together for life, no matter what.
Gotcha. What advice would you give to somebody that's in a relationship that is trying to obtain this mindset, but they're struggling to have it? Maybe they struggle with fidelity, or they struggle with just any common thing that could be within their relationship, and they're trying to just gain that better mindset. What advice would you give?
Okay. Well, I'll tell you a couple of things that are very important for people in the dating process, because we do work with couples who are ready to be married. They made a commitment to each other, and so we prepare them for marriage. And one of the things that we find is that, first of all, not everybody's totally transparent with each other, and that is a huge intimacy blocker. And so you need to start by being transparent with each other, so you understand each other, fully, and not just make any assumptions about each other. Because sometimes people go into marriage with assumptions, and then they find that, those assumptions are not founded, and then they run into difficulty. Okay. The second thing that a person needs to do is to really take care of like hurts that you're carrying, because if you go into a marriage with that kind of romantic haze, and don't take care of the things that hold you back, or the things that sabotaged your previous relationship, if you don't get healing for those, then chances are very good that they're going to show up again. Right. And so you need to make sure that you get that that healing that you need. And then the third thing is the mindset. The mindset is something that you force yourself to develop, to be very honest with you. Okay. And now, in our case, it came from a faith foundation, as well as from our cultural, heritage. But you don't need that. You have to realize that marriage is a commitment for life. And so that's the mindset you need to go in with. And if you're feeling unworthy, if you're feeling that you're not attractive enough, like all those kind of things, then you need to get some help. You may need to go get some counseling, some therapy. If you're from a faith background, you need to talk to your faith leader, see if somebody can help you.
Got you. Okay. Now, what would be the hardest thing you think you've had to learn while maneuvering through your relationship?
Okay. Well, there's probably quite a few things that I can mention, but one of the hardest things that I had to learn to maneuver is really, to understand the way in which my wife was processing things. And so for example, like some people would label my wife a contemplative, meaning that like she needs a lot of quiet time,
Okay.
to be by herself, to process things. Whereas like I'm more of a, and this is probably typical of many males, where you want to get things dealt with right away because we tend to be more fixers,
Okay.
right? Yeah. And so I needed to get things done immediately, resolved right away. Whereas so when she was not willing to get things resolved right away, I thought, oh, you're not willing to do it. Like you're not cooperating with me.
Got you.
But in reality, what I found out was that just the way she's wired, the way God made her, she needs that quiet time, to process things, and then we can come and conclude and talk. So one of the major mistakes that I often made is because I didn't get her input right away, I would go ahead and make decisions on my own.
Oh.
And this especially showed up in financial decisions. And so I made many decisions that she was totally unaware of until one day she got her hands on all the credit card bills. And so at that point, like there was there's nothing I could hide behind.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So at that point, we, and then of course, the reason that I didn't want to bring them to her is because she's going to get mad. And so
Gotcha.
I'll find a way to deal with it. Well, I never did find a way to deal with it. And so at that point, because I kind of jumped the gun on these things, then we had to have a number of conversations around that.
Gotcha.
She had to forgive me, quite a bit. And then together, again, because we had made a commitment to be together for life, right? Mm-hmm. So at that point, it's like, the question was, how are we going to make this work? How are we going to pay off these bills? What are we going to cut out? What are we going to add in terms of income and so on? And so at that point, we're able to overcome that.
Gotcha. Wow. Okay. Well, that's good. Communication is definitely a big thing within relationships. Wow. Okay. Let me see. What else did I want to ask you? When you talk about internal purity, tell me a little bit about that.
Okay. So internal purity is really taking care of your, like anything that will contaminate your spirit. So it could be fear, worry, anxiety, anger, lust, all these kind of things that we as human beings, deal with. And so when our internal purity is not maintained, then first of all, we cannot see with clarity, what is going on, what needs to be done. And so what comes out, like there's a verse in the Bible that says, out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. In other words, what's inside of you is what's going to come out of your mouth. And so you need to make sure that you're cleaned up on the inside. Okay. And some of it is like what we talked about as inner healing, the healing of the spirit, and the soul hurts and so on. And once you take care of those things that are contaminating your spirit, now what comes out? So for example, and one of the things that many people struggle with is purity in terms of the way we see each other as sexual beings.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, if you're seeing the other person simply for their sexuality, then the way that impurity shows itself in sexual exploitation.
Right.
So a person lies to the other person, tells them exactly what they want to hear, just so they can have, sex with them. And then afterwards they dump them, or they not interested anymore. And or they treat them that way, and all of a sudden, if their sexual interest starts to go down, then they lose total interest in them as a person. See, all of that comes out of an internal impurity, and so when you keep yourself clean and pure on the inside, then it's going to start showing itself on the outside.
Gotcha. Okay. Now, how would you advise somebody, because I know you touched on it briefly earlier, but how would you advise a couple to communicate without being misunderstood? Like, what verbiage would you advise them to use in different things like that? Or what do you tell them to practice kind of mindfulness? Are you familiar with maybe emotional intelligence? Do you add any of that stuff within your mentorship training?
Okay. Yeah, with our mentorship, one of the first things we teach people is to maintain a time of stillness, before God. We call it soaking, and soaking is where you have some quiet instrumental music playing, and that basically puts you in the right space. So you can, just allow God, just kind of intimacy with God, allowing Him to do the work that you cannot do. And so you want to operate from a position of rest and not restlessness. Right? That's the number one thing. All right. Now, some of it is just learning. So one of the one of the common things that you can do to have great communication is to simply repeat what you heard your partner say. Because we listen through our filters, you see, and so sometimes somebody may not intend anything by what they said. Like, let's say, I'll say a very innocuous example. So somebody says, "Thanks a lot, eh?" Okay. Yeah. Now somebody made so it's like, "Thanks a lot." Oh, you mean you didn't like what I said? So you said thanks a lot. Like, you just repeat that to them. You said thanks a lot. Yeah, I'm so appreciative of what you did. Oh,
right. So they can kind of elaborate, because thanks a lot could mean anything.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So you avoid misunderstanding by repeating, and sometimes when you repeat that, if you're sensing some feelings, in that, like, so for example, like somebody, my wife comes to me and says, Jiva, like, I am really, really tired today. Okay. It's like, hey, Slojana, you're really, really tired. Like, I feel like you didn't sleep well last night, or like something else going on behind this. So now she can say, well, you know what, I've been thinking about, what happened, in our family situation, whatever.
Okay, and they can open up dialogue and conversation to really elaborate on why she isn't sleeping well, or got you.
Yeah. So when you repeat it and you pick up on the feelings, that will actually avoid a lot of misunderstanding. Now, another important tip that I can give you, for communication is, how do you convey to your partner that you are not happy about something? Okay. So for example, again, I'll use my wife as an example. Let's say, she said something, about the way I cleaned up the yard. Okay. She basically, so she wants to convey that to me. If she says to me, you know what, Jiva, there's one thing I don't understand about you, is you are not a very, very good when it comes to cleaning up the yard. Can't you see all the weeds that you left behind? Why don't you pull them out? Okay. Now, if she said that to me, that basically is a communication blocker. Because now I'm going to turn around and I can say a number of things. One of the things I could say is, well, if you didn't like what I did, why don't you go and do it yourself? Woman?
Right.
Okay. So I can get defensive. Okay. Yeah. So if on the other hand, if she said, Jiva, when you clean the yard and you still leave some weeds behind, it makes me, feel, like what would someone think when they come to our yard? Our yard doesn't look tidy enough. And, and she says something like that in that kind of a tone. So do you notice how that was constructed?
Yeah.
When you did this, it made me feel.
Right.
Like that's some people call them I statements. Okay. So I feel insecure, when, you don't touch me enough.
Right.
Touch me enough. Like that kind of stuff. Rather than saying, like, what kind of insensitive brute are you? You never ever touched me. Didn't your mom teach you how to touch people?
Right. So that, yeah, that do sound better. Right. Okay.
It's the same message, you see. Because when somebody tells me, wife tells me, this is how you made me feel, I cannot argue with her feelings, because feelings just are, right? And so, but I still got the message across that when you did this, it made me feel. So we didn't somehow minimize, what was done, but we present it in such a way that now it can lead to conflict, resolving the conflict in a positive way.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, Jiva, this is all the time that we have. Why don't you tell our audience where they can find you if they'd like to find you for marriage counseling, mentorship, or anything like that?
Okay. So we have a website called thesams.ca. Our last name is Sam. So the Sams, we're based in Canada. So it's the Canadian Sams, thesams.ca is all you need to remember to go on our website. And there we describe our marriage mentorship process. We don't have a lot there about people, like the pre-marriage mentorship, but that's something we do as well. So if couples are looking, to go into marriage, so they're totally prepared before they get to the repair stage, then we're glad to work with them and provide the inner healing services and everything that they need so they can be the best for each other and have a great marriage together.
Awesome. And all of that information will also be in the show notes. So I want to thank you for coming on today.
You're very welcome, DJ. Thank you for this opportunity to share with your listeners.
Most definitely. And I want to thank the listeners as well for tuning in. And until next time.
Thank you for tuning in to today's show. If you liked this podcast, please download and subscribe. If there's anything you would like to talk about in regards to relationships, or would like to be a guest on the show to speak on relationships or get advice, you can always connect via social media at Playing for Keeps or email DJ at info@p4kdating.com. Thank you for tuning in, and bye for now.